Nice to see you again. Let's welcome back to Physics of Behavior. Let's take a nice deep sigh of relief. It's beautiful summer outside, and here we are studying about biology. We're coming really close to the end. There will be one more lecture. I see some sighs of disappointment. Yeah, just one more. You said two more? Give it one more in this course. Yeah. Next week will be the last lecture. Next week. Okay? You're not here next week? Too bad. I'm sad about that. As a way of reviewing, we know that we are in the course. We had three major parts. We had a part about network motifs, the reuse of elementary circuits in biological networks. So negative autoregulation and positive autoregulation, feed-forward loops, single input modules. We talked about robustness, the idea that biological circuits are built so that they can work precisely. Let's take a nice deep sigh. Despite naturally occurring perturbations, we talked about how paradoxical enzymes that do a thing in the opposite can give robustness to protein circuits. We looked at bacterial chemotaxis, the swimming of cells, and exact adaptation, fold change detection. We looked at glucose regulation and looked at and saw dynamic compensation, how glands can grow to compensate for faraway parameters. We looked at robust oscillators. And now we're in the last part about optimality. The idea that natural selection tends to optimize fitness, and from that point of view, that we can calculate and predict what biological structures will appear in a given situation. We talked about how to optimize. We talked about the fitness landscape. How to what sets the number of proteins that a cell makes, like LAC-Z, that you can measure cost and benefit and predict in some situations how quickly evolution will work. And we looked at the idea of multitask evolution, Pareto optimality, that gives simple patterns in biological data from which you can infer the tasks. We did that last time. And today I want to continue talking about optimality. And just our topic today will be about evolution of modularity. Just to step back for a second and appreciate the amazingness of evolution. 65 million years ago, dinosaurs went extinct. Remember I mentioned that. And there was a mammalian species living in the shadows of the dinosaurs that suddenly had all the niches in the world were empty. The sea, the air, the land. And I want to somehow shut down this noise. Can you help me? Thanks. This is Itai Katsir, PhD student with me. Technical support, man of all trades, etc. In 10 million years, this ancestor diversified to make whales, bats, cats, primates, very different creatures. 10 million years. If it's a rodent, let's say with the generation, it's about 10 to the 8. 10 million years is 10 to the 8 years. Right? So about 10 to the 8 generations. If it's a generation per year, or 10 to the 7 generations, a generation once per 10 years, whatever. 10 to the 7 generations, 10 to the 8 generations. Is that fast or slow? We need to compare it to something. If we compare it to something like trying to evolve on a computer a certain logic gate circuit by, nice deep sigh of relief for Avi, by taking some logic gates and randomly rewiring them until they give a desired logic function, like x and y or z and w, we can quickly see that in 10 to the 8 generations, we can barely make a circuit that has, a dozen inputs. And we'll talk about that in detail. So, in some cases, in some way, you can say that 10 to the 8 generations of natural selection is astoundingly quick to make these. It's not only quick. I mean, in order to change the flipper and to make a wing, you need to change a lot of bones, but that's not enough. You need to change the muscles. Otherwise, you need to have blood vessels. You need to have nerves. Otherwise, it won't work, right? You need to have the brain region to control it. So every change like that is a lot of changes together. So how does that work? How can evolution do that? Can evolution do that? I mean, we can always also challenge ourselves. Is our theory enough to explain the wonders of what we observe in nature? So, from this starting point, I want to draw now to get inspiration from another parallel process, another parallel experiment on evolution that is going on, not biological evolution, but another kind of evolution, which is evolution of human engineering. Okay, so when you look at human engineering, also, as we see now every year, develops astoundingly complex artifacts, right? And thinking 100 years ago where electronics was and where it is today, very, very quick growth in complexity and things that work in the real world. So we can maybe learn something from engineering. Of course, engineering is very different from evolution. Evolution is more like tinkering, as Francois Jacob wrote in a famous paper. So tinkering means you kind of improvise by random changes on existing material, what you have. If you're a bat wing, you have to start from a bat wing. Whereas engineers in a mature engineering field go to engineering school, they learn principles, they have vast knowledge of all the other engineers, libraries of parts, etc. So the process is different. But when you look at the product, the outcome of engineering, like electronic circuits, etc., we can see, as we've seen throughout the course, a lot of resemblance to what happens in evolved cells. For example, engineers reuse the same elementary circuits again and again. Let's say not AND gates, for example, NAND gates, in order to build all logic gates inside a chip that has millions and billions of logic gates. So you reuse the same circuits again and again. Why? Because those are the circuits that actually work, they're robust, they work in the real world. And if you open an engineering book, you see maybe 100 favorite circuits, and maybe for each circuit like that, there's many others that work on paper, but they don't work in the real world because of robustness problems. So robustness is also a main concern for engineers and determines the structure a lot of times. Just like we saw that robustness can determine why a biological circuit is built the way it is and not some other way. So these elements of simplicity, and also optimality, of course, a lot of times you try to optimize parameters in your circuit. So there's a lot of principles from engineering that maybe can teach us about natural selection, but we still have to understand how evolution finds them. And a big thing about engineering and about biology is that engineered systems and biological systems, if you look at them on all scales, are modular. So in engineering, very familiar modules like in the car, you have your engine, you have your battery, you can replace the battery without touching the engine. That's good, right? Modules are good you can fix one of them without damaging the rest. In software, you have subroutines and functions, etc. What other examples are there for? What? IKEA. You buy a new you want to assemble something, you buy what is it, like a bed. It's all modular, and that's good engineering, right? Because you can, first in software, if you want to evolve new software, you can use the existing modules and recombine them in new ways. You don't have to invent fast Fourier transform again and again. It exists. Okay, so you can test them. You can change them without hurting the rest of the software, as long as the input and output to the rest of the world is standardized, is like interfaces. That's good engineering, right? Now, in biology, if you look at all scales, you also see modularity. So, for example, we're in a university that's made of departments, that's made of labs and groups, that's made of people, that are made of organs. So, my liver is in charge of making glucose for the body, making blood proteins, etc. the lung in charge of bringing in oxygen, taking out carbon dioxide. They're not mixed up, these structures, but they communicate with each other. So the glucose from the liver goes to the lung, and the oxygen from the lung goes to the liver. If there's something wrong with my lung, the liver, of course, will suffer from it. But because of this nice interface, just oxygen going there, glucose going there. Inside the organ, we have cells, which are classical module. Inside the cell, there are organelles, like the nucleus inside, which protects the genes. All the genes are inside the nucleus. And you have the Golgi that transfers proteins and decorates them, and ER that makes proteins, all these little organelles inside the cell. And if we look inside the nucleus, we see the DNA, and on the DNA are genes, and genes are also modular. They have promoter regions to control them, they have coding regions, exons, introns. The promoters are modular. They have little binding sites for transcription factor. If I delete that site, that transcription factor can't bind anymore, and the gene won't be regulated under that condition. Right? So classic example, fruit fly development, you have this, in certain part, 7 stripes are formed, and there's a gene which has a little piece in the DNA. If you delete it, stripe number 2 goes away. The baby fly won't have stripe number 2. That's Eve stripe 2, I think it's called. So it's like a little module, yeah? But of course, there's a limit. This Eve stripe 2 exists in different species of flies, and you can take the module from one fly and put it in the other, and you get the stripe. But if you take half the sequence from one fly and half the sequence from another fly and glue them, it doesn't work anymore. So inside the module, it's not modular anymore. So not everything is modular. Like the ribosome is a big machine, but you can't really understand the different proteins in it are all kind of melded together to make one function. So we can even think of a continuum between modularity and non-modularity. And at some point you get to kind of a hardwired, something you can't split up anymore. What is modularity? Modular system can be decomposed to a first approximation. Sometimes this it gets fuzzy, but it can be decomposed into parts with a autonomous structure and function. It's clear that the battery is for electricity, the motor is for running, and they're both structurally and functionally defined. Here is an example of a network that's non-modular, a network that's modular. You can see it by eye. I just want to say the network can be quantified. Modularity can be quantified by different algorithms, like the Girvan-Newman algorithm. And the idea of these algorithms is that you try to split the graph, the network, into pieces that have more connections inside the piece than to the outside. And you write some number that has to do with this property of how many connections are inside compared to outside. And you compare that to randomized networks. And you can get a number for how modular the network is. So this might have a modularity of 0.1. This would have a modularity of 1 or something. And you can say that there's a continuum that you can qualify of modularity from non-modular to modular. And at least for networks and circuits like that, you can quantify it. It's not important now, the details, just the idea. Any questions so far? I'll pause until there's a question. Who's going to save us so we can continue? Yeah.
But surely engineering isn't the right comparison, because engineering is like an intelligent design perspective, whereas evolution depends on random mutations which result in some weird design flaws, like the giraffe nerves.
Yeah. So the question is it right to compare engineering to evolution? Because engineering is a kind of an intelligent process, like intelligent design, that we always I look at as a source of inspiration to keep on refining our theory of evolution and understanding it more and more. And engineering has this random variation, and can have these non-optimal solutions, like I mentioned in previous lectures. And so, indeed, the process of engineering and process of natural selection are very different. One is random tinkering, the other one is rational top-down principles. The process is different, but my comment is that the product, the outcome, has some similarities, like these, as if evolution went to engineering school. Of course, evolution didn't go to engineering school, but it's as if the outcome is. So the process is different. The process means that we can have historical effects. So let's say if you have very small populations, a mutation that doesn't do anything beneficial can take over, and then we have some historical artifact, founder effect or something like that, that is very important to remember that this can happen. And the argument is how much these random and historical effects determine biological structure versus optimality principles. So that the answer could be different for any system. The point of view that I'm taking is that I want to assume first optimality, and then maybe I'll find out that it can't explain it with any constraints, and then I'm going to admit its history. But other people start the other way around. Did I answer the question? Okay, thanks.
By the way, there could be historical effects also in engineering, because if there is someone build a model and it works, even if it's not optimal, sometimes you use it.
Yes, a classic example in engineering is the keyboard on the typewriter, QWERTY keyboard that was designed for mechanical typewriters to avoid collisions of keys like that. So they made the typewriter as slow as possible, so you can't type quickly to avoid this. Now with electronic keyboards, we're stuck with this QWERTY, but you can make a keyboard that you can type much faster because of the placement of the letters, but there's a fitness barrier, which is training people to adopt a new keyboard. So that's an example of a historical process where dynamics hasn't caught up yet, and it's mostly a sociological process. And human sociology is also a product of evolution. Human cultures evolve too, etc. Shall we continue? All right. So we're going to talk about modularity. So we said welcome, breath, look at the review. We're wondering at the simplicity. So I just want to say that without modularity in organs, cells, proteins, genes, also proteins, I forgot to say protein. Each protein usually is made of domains. So lac repressor is made of a domain that binds the input signal, allolactose, a domain that binds DNA, and a domain that binds other copies of the protein to make tetramers. And you can mix and match. You can take one domain from one protein, another domain from another protein, and make a chimera that mixes the properties. So this transcription factor will respond to signal A and activate genes B. So that's kind of also an amazing ability to recombine that evolution also uses, to recombine parts. Engineers use too, etc. So without this, I claim the science of molecular biology would not get off the ground. We would not have this course. We would not have the Wolfson building. Because without the simplicity, if, for instance, each biological function was distributed 1% among 100 proteins, deleting any of those genes would not give a measurable effect. And we would not understand the connection between genes and biological functions, proteins and biological functions. We would not get to first base in biology. So these principles that make engineering so nice also makes it possible for human beings to understand biology. And we can ask, why are they there? I mean, evolution, we think, didn't work so that scientists can understand biology. Evolution tries to, natural selection chooses organisms that happen to be better at reproducing and surviving in a certain situation, right? Not for biologists to understand them later. But still, so why is it that you have these simplicity principles? Are they the only way maybe to scale up and make complex systems? Right? Maybe it's the only way you can scale up to form complexity. So we talked about modularity. It can be quantified. Now, if you look at just all the possible networks with 10 nodes, and you ask how many of them are modular, the answer is that modularity is extremely rare. So the property of having these groups is extreme, because any connection almost here would ruin modularity. Switching any connection. So modularity is...
It's rare in regards to random, or rare in regards to real systems?
Is rare in random nets, but common in biology. The regulatory motifs, dense overlapping regulons, single input modules. So it's rare in random networks, it's common in biology. So evolution somehow generates it, yeah. We talk about modular organs, cells, regulation networks, genes, proteins. But here is the puzzle. It's really rare at random. And so we can say, okay, let's make a computer simulation of evolution and try to take an electronic circuit, like I mentioned, not just a simulation of an evolutionary process, and try to evolve it to a certain goal. And this happens a lot in fields of evolutionary engineering, where you don't know, like even today, deep learning, like all these neural networks, you have this kind of array of neurons, and you have some images, and you want to find where the cat is, and you rewire and change the weights again until you get an answer. So this is done very often now. Whenever you do that, you end up with an outcome that can solve the problem, but looks like this, not like this. So computer simulations of evolution in many fields that do this they're not modular. You know this? You're aware of this? Yeah, it's actually quite a big problem because you can't understand how they work, typically. Do you agree with me? How many people here heard of deep learning? So this is a vast majority. Okay, so that's a major problem. I mean, if you look at human brains that look at vision, the brain is modular, and like the visual system is modular, and many parts of the brain are modular. There are also parts that are not immediately obvious in the cortex. So there's also a spectrum like this in the brain. So, and how do these simulations work? You take some seed population, and you mutate it, which means rewire or change the weights.
What was the question again?
This is I'm writing here a recipe for simulated evolution. You take n organisms, networks, whatever. You mutate them, you rewire them. Then you select. You choose the ones that are best at the task, and then they reproduce. You take, let's say, out of these, the half that are the best, and each one you duplicate them. So now you have n again, and you repeat. And this is how these simulations work. And you need some goal here. You get to a perfect solution, but it's not modular. In hardware evolution, you take a little piece of programmable silicon, and you try to make it, let's say, compute build an amplifier that amplifies some frequencies. You randomly rewire connections between transistors. You get a perfect, very good solution, even better than engineers would make. But you try to understand how it works. You don't understand. This Thompson, 1998, showed this. It works by exploiting some parasitic capacitance of the box. You could never think of something like that. It goes beyond the game. It goes out of the box and if you change the temperature that you evolved in, it doesn't work anymore. So you get you get a solution to exactly the question you wanted using every dirty trick that you can, and very fragile too. So that's a typical case in evolutionary simulations in engineering. So engineers try to get around that by forcing modules. So when you evolve software, you make the evolution have to use modules like software, but natural selection can't do that. We don't know of any process that forces you to become modular a priori. I mean,
You started out modular when you were made modular, or?
Good question. So in these simulations, if you start modular, you quickly go non-modular because there's so many possibilities to change connections that ruin modularity and improve even performance. So modularity can be suboptimal for given performance because there's so many possible connections. One of them probably increases fitness. So that's why, right? So this is a nice deep sigh of relief. Welcome. So that's a puzzle, yeah?
It doesn't capture the important parts of evolution, right?
So he said these simulations don't capture the important part of evolution, like
Changing environment.
Yeah, changing environments.
And,
Yes.
And behaving to fit yourself. So if it was constant, perhaps evolution would look
Yes.
non-modular.
Yes. So the comment is that there's something very specific about these simulations that is not like the real world. Maybe that'll save us. These simulations, we give them a constant goal. I'll give you a specific example in a second. In the real world, this environment keeps changing. That maybe reminds us of what engineers use modules for. Nice deep sigh of relief. So if engineers had to build one time, let's say the perfect amplifier, they maybe would use every dirty trick, the shape of the box, the spare capacitance. But if they knew that tomorrow you need to redesign it and redesign it and redesign it, then modules are very helpful because you don't need to redesign everything if you want to change one specification. So maybe that'll help us, right? So maybe let's try to add that to simulations and see if we get modules.
If you have a system that includes a few traits and the environment change so that you need to change only one trait, you don't want to change a component that changes all traits at the same time.
Good point. So the point is that if you want to change one thing about your system, you want to be able to change one trait without ruining everything else, right? So you want to change, for instance, birds, these forelimbs and hind limbs, birds, you want to put feathers on the wings, but scales on the feet, right? So you want to be able to not put feathers everywhere, so things like that, right? You want to change only one thing without ruining everything else. Okay, so that's the idea where we're going. We're going to take a simulation of evolution and see how we can add to it something that's very biological, these changing environments, what you've just discussed, and see how if we can get modularity to evolve and what happens. What's the minimal thing we need to do to simulations of evolution in order to get modularity to evolve? How quickly does it happen? And I'll just tell you the answer. It's going to happen, and it's going to speed up evolution tremendously, actually. So it also maybe offers one way to understand this amazing ability of biological evolution to go so quickly between what looks like very different designs. So we'll talk about modularity and speed up. All right? Okay, let's start. Let's do it. Let's look at an example. And so we set up the frame, right? So what are we going to do? Set the frame. We erase, make a lot of preparation. Maybe we keep our like totem animals. So give us. We want the intelligence and awesome perseverance of the whale and the maneuverability and astounding agility of the insect-eating bat. Let us summon these as we look at some gates. So let's look at what I'm going to do. The plan is I'm going to walk you through a simulation of an electronic circuit, and we're going to get non-modular solutions, and then we're going to try to add these changing environments and see how we can get modularity. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to evolve circuits made of logic gates. So we're going to use what engineers use. Okay, so I'm going to explain. We're going to use the NAND gate. NAND gate, not AND gate. And we're going to make circuits where each node is a not AND gate and wire them together. So the substrate we're going to work with is not AND gate. So this not AND gate has two inputs, X and Y, and an output. So this is logic circuits. So X could be either 0 or 1, and Y could be either 0 or 1. So there's 4 possible inputs. You're asking, what does this have to do with biology? So this could even be gene regulation circuits, where we saw we had AND gates and OR gates. But more, it's like a metaphor for something that evolves towards a goal. Okay.
And with NAND gates, you can build the entire custom.
So the comment is that engineers use NAND gates because you can build OR gates, AND gates, XOR gates with NAND gates. They're universal. NAND gates are enough to build any logic function. Correct. So let's just start with AND, X and Y. This is NAND. X and Y, you remember, is 0, 0, 0, 1, right? Only when both are 1, you get a 1. So this is, I know that many people are very familiar with this. Some people see it for the first time. So. What's a NAND? NAND is not AND. So it's just, if this is 0, it's a 1. It's not. So NAND means give a 1 unless the two inputs are 1. It's a NAND gate. Okay. And using NANDs, you can build any gate, even complicated one like exclusive OR. Exclusive OR means exclusive OR means 0, 1, 1, 0. Exclusive OR means X or Y, but not if both of them are 1. So it's like a non-monotonic gate. You increase Y, you get a 1. You increase X, you go down to 0. It's kind of a... So this is like a complicated logic function, exclusive OR. You can build it out of NAND gates. Okay, so that's the gates we're going to use. And we're going to... I want to tell you, I want to give a goal. So I want circuits that satisfy the following goal: X, exclusive OR, Y, and Z, exclusive OR, W. So what am I? This is going to be a circuit that has 4 gates, X, Y, 4 inputs. And I'm going to let evolution add and remove gates and rewire them. And the output is supposed to be that function. So our fitness is going to be number of correct outputs divided by from all possible inputs. So X can be 0 or 1, Y can be 0 or 1, Z can be 0 or 1, W can be 0 and 1. So there's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, all possible 16 possibilities, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I put them into the circuit and I ask how many times does it give me the correct answer, X exclusive OR Y and Z exclusive OR W, which is either 0 or 1, right? So how many times that happens? If it happens none of the time, fitness is 0. If it happens 8 times, fitness is half. If all 16 possibilities are correct, I nailed it. So that's going to be my fitness.
I understand the goal, but at least in electronics, if you get none of the times, you're very close to the right solution. And here you would get a very bad fitness.
So your question is,
all you need to do is negate the output.
if you have 0, so if a circuit that does nothing, or
Not does nothing. Predicts the exact opposite of this. Correct.
Not.
The
You need
exact
to
close to the right
okay.
solution.
So here, this question, thinking like an engineer, this is a complicated question, but the answer, I think, if you have the opposite, all you need to do is do a NOT gate, which is a NAND from the same input. That's nice, like engineering thinking. But that animal is going to be very poor. So that's a life or death for the animal. But the engineer says, okay, so that's like it's another difference.
It's also
It's correct.
it's also only one mutation, perhaps.
Yeah, one mutation away. It's one mutation away from a deep fitness valley. So you're in the valley of the shadow of death, even though there's a nice mountain away. Correct, yeah. So if you have very small population sizes, or you're the only one, you can still make it. Or if you're riding on the top of a really useful mutation like eyes, you can make it. That's very good. So here we're making a caricature of evolution. And maybe we can also add a small cost. Let's say we can add and remove gates, but each gate has a little cost. We want to have compact, minimal solutions. Did I explain myself here? Yeah.
Why did you choose this fitness function and not, let's say, correct outputs minus
Incorrect outputs.
Yeah.
Great. We can also do that. I don't think it'll change things much. Yeah. It's okay. And now I want to now make a little evolution. So I'm going to make a genome. My genome is going to look like this. So each circuit has a genome. So this is, let's say, gate number 1. And this is the gene for gate number 2. This is the gene for gate number 3. And each gene has 2 numbers. So if I have gate number 1 here connected to gate number 13 and to, this is inputs. If I have gate number 1, gate number 2, gate number 13, and the inputs, it gets inputs from gate number 13 and from gate number 2. And gate number 2 maybe gets inputs from gate number 8 and gate number 11. So you see, each gate has two numbers. Where do two inputs come from? And now a mutation,
Which could get loops.
you can get loops. Yeah. Now is a question: do you want to allow loops, which can complicate the? I think we're going to allow loops too. So you can have an input. The gate number one can get an input from gate number one. Then it's yeah. Then it makes it complicated to analyze it. You can either have delay or no delay, and it's a detail. It's not critical for us now. Mutation is change a number. So a mutation is like this. Now gate number one, let's say I'm going to change this number from 13 to 8. And now gate number one gets an input also from gate number 8. That's a mutation. I can also add a gate, remove a gate, and for advanced students, sometimes I can recombine two genomes. What does that mean? That also happens in biology. Take two circuits and make a baby. How I make a baby? I cut this genome here, and this genome here, and I take this part and I glue it together to this part, and make a new genome. That's called recombine. If you want to be super advanced, you can also duplicate. So I can take this part of the genome and duplicate it. Make new gates, but have exactly the same inputs. All these things are not going to help us get modularity, I already tell you. Not recombining, not duplication, on their own, not going to be enough. But they're biologically exist. They exist in genomes. There's duplication, there's recombination for sure. Mom and papa, we get each of our chromosomes, usually has a piece from mom, piece from dad. Yeah, that's the way it works. But it's not going to give us modularity. It's a great substrate for modularity, because if you have these two arms and you duplicate something, you have another set of arms, then you can start working on it. So it's a good substrate if you already have modules. But on its own, it doesn't per se give you modularity. Okay, I'm just preempting because it's a question that often in people's mind: does duplication or combination per se give you modularity? Give you some features, sometimes like random things that repeat, but not real functional modularity like what we're talking about.
What happens if you remove a gate and something else needs this as input? Does that creature die?
If you remove a gate and something else needs it as an input.
But you don't remove gates.
You said remove gates.
Yeah, I said remove gates. You can remove gates. And what happens? Yeah, you can make some choice. Good. No, it's a good point. Yeah, good point. You need to decide on something like a zero input. I think that makes sense. Yeah. These are choices. They're not going to help us get modularity, but they're very important to understand. Okay, so how does the simulation work? You start with, let's say you say, I'm going to start with n equals 100 circuits. Let's say, just say, each with 10 gates, or 20 gates, or 30, doesn't matter. And random genomes. So for each gate, I choose 2 gates at random, and I get 100 random circuits. And now, yeah, right. I forgot to say, there's special gates, but not really gates. They're called inputs. There's X, Y, Z, and W. Let's call them 101, 102, 103, and 104. And you can have an input from X and an input. In fact, it's nice to start with circuits where some of the gates are connected already to the inputs. Otherwise, you change the inputs, nothing going to happen. So, I don't know. Did I explain myself so far? So I want you to be able to do this kind of simulation later if you feel like it, because it's fun, because you can see kind of evolution working, and it's also technologically important for all of you that want to go into the industry and learn some deep neural networks to analyze images of basketball games or whatever, movies like that, or biological big data. That's basically the principle of learning. You make changes, you compare to the goal, you keep the ones that work better, You make babies from them, you could recombine them, you cut them up, you open up. Yeah.
If your fitness function is discrete,
Yeah.
I mean, like you have, let's say you have only one correct output.
Yeah.
So it's you can't evolve the system, right? Because you don't know what is better than what.
Yeah, so discrete input functions means that a lot of gates will have the same fitness, but some of them will jump to one. It still works. It's going to work.
You just randomly hit the right circuit. And
Yeah, not randomly. You go up a 16-step ladder.
no, but if you have one correct output.
Only one correct output.
Yes.
One. No. Okay. So maybe I can explain the. What do you mean one correct output? Is it, what you do is you take, in this case, if you want to involve a XOR gate, you take all 4 possibilities for inputs, and you always get 4 outputs. The question is, what fraction of these 4 are correct? Are these? So you always have 16. There's 16 inputs and 16 outputs, and there's always the correct 16 outputs, but usually you don't hit them.
In theory, at the end, you get to the perfect circuit, right? Because if you try long enough, at some chance it's a finite system.
Yes. If you sample all the possible circuits, you'll get to it.
Okay.
But of course, that's exponentially difficult. Very, very, very difficult, especially if you grow these things. So if you ask how many possible gates there are, how many possible circuits there are, with 10 gates, and each one can get 2, there's a lot, right? There's 10 times 10, that's 100. So it would times 10 to the power 100?
20.
10 to the power 20?
If you have for each gate 20.
Yeah, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, that's 10 to the power 20, correct. 10 to the power 20 is a big number. Correct? Agreed? And if you go to now a gate with 6 inputs, you get to 10 to the 30. With 20 gates, 30 gates. And
Although most of them have cycles and those aren't really necessary.
yeah,
So if you throw those out, it's still a very, very large number, but it's
thank you. We're talking big numbers here. So that's another thing about evolution. The number of possible connections you can make is astronomical. And evolution somehow finds the needle in the haystack because it climbs up a fitness. Yeah, it has a path. You can see it has a fitness direction, unless there's a valley there. You have to go. Okay. So what happens when this you make random genomes? Now what you do is you mutate. You make a change, and let's say p equals 10% of the circuits. You take 10% of the circuit. Oh, 10%. Yeah, you can say 10% of the circuits. I'm going to make one change, or that'll be very slow. Let's make it in 10% in 50% of the circuits. Whatever. I'm going to make one change, and then I select, let's say, the top 50% of the circuits. That's just an example. You can do different kinds of selections. I change the half. This is called elite selection. There's different. I'm going to take the half that do best, and the other half goes to the wastebasket. And then I duplicate. So if I started with 100, I have 50, which are the best fitness, highest fitness, and I make a baby for each one of them. So I'm back to 100. And then I mutate, select, duplicate. Mutate, select, duplicate. Each round like this is one generation. Okay? And so I always have 100 circuits, and I mutate them, select them, mutate them, select them. Sometimes I can recombine them. When I make a baby, I can choose two of the parents, and make a baby by recombining, taking half the genome. That's also possible and widely done, but it's not going to give us modularity, but it's widely done. Widely. It's done in us. I mean, it has a lot of advantages, especially if modules already exist. Any questions about this simulation?
How does the output represent XY in other?
How does the output represent? Can you say?
How do you measure if it's the correct output?
Okay, so what you do is how do you measure? So you have, good question. I didn't say that, right? I have one gate. It's very important. I have a special gate that's called the output gate. It's, let's say, gate 1001, whatever. It's my output gate. It's a very special gate, okay? And this gate, of course, gives input from two gates. If it gets input from nothing, let's say it's a zero input, whatever. And now I change X, Y, Z, and W. all 16 possibilities, 0, 1, 1, 0 there, and I measure what I get in the output gate. So I try all 16 possibilities of x, y, z. I measure the output, and then I decide what fraction of these 16 the output gets the desired answer, x XOR y and z XOR w. Did I answer your question? So yeah, there's a special, yeah.
Just a comment about the mutation rate.
Yeah.
That I think it should also be subject to mutations.
To evolution.
To evolution up to a certain.
Yeah. Good point. So you can evolve maybe even the mutation rate, because if the mutation is very high, if you have a good solution, it will be ruined in the next generation. If it's very low, you wait. So there's an optimal. Indeed, across animals, mutation rate is 1 base pair per 300 generations. In E. coli, mutation rate is 10 to the minus 9, and there's 1 million base pairs. So and that comes up to approximately 10, that comes 1 in 300 generations. In a human being, there's 1,000 times more bases and 1,000 times more accurate DNA repair. So for some reason, organisms tend to have, except for viruses, a certain mutation rate. Maybe it's optimized. And it's evolvable. So if you take a bacterium, put it in the gut, a lot of times you get a mutator strain. It has a mutation in the DNA repair mechanism. It makes more mutations. Then it evolves, adapts. And then there's the reverse mutation and it stops being so highly mutagenic, because high mutagenesis is also bad for you because of this mutational load. So there's this events where you become a mutator strain and then you go back in order to adapt. So that's also very interesting. It's also not going to give us modularity, but it's also something you can put into the simulations. I'm kind of obsessed with modularity, but this is a nice lecture to talk about how biological evolution works, right? All these rates and the genomes and duplication and so. Okay, so let's run this simulation and see what happens. Right, we have our goal, and we can plot here. Here's generations, and here's fitness. So we start with, and I'm going to talk, let's talk about the maximum fitness in the population. So I have 100 organisms, so which one has the highest fitness? We talk about median fitness, doesn't really matter. So we start from our initial conditions, our random circuit have a certain fitness. It's not 0, by the way, because you can by chance get it right. I have here the graph. It's around, actually not too bad, around 0.75 or something, the random circuits. Right? Correct. The output tends to 0, so, okay. And now, that lasts for a while, and suddenly there's a jump. Oh, there's a circuit that's a little better. And then there's another jump. So this jump is, let's say, at around 10 generations. Then there's another jump here at around 1,000 generations. And then there's a stasis. And then there's a perfect solution at 10,000 generations. Because it doesn't.
Why doesn't we do something that really screws it up and jumps down?
That if there's a particular organism, a particular circuit that screws up, it'll be lost. And this is the best circuit out of this 100. So it turns out that if the population was very small, you can screw everything up. But if it's 100, some of them don't even get mutated. So you stay the same. The worst thing you can do is stay the same. Unless you get everything gets mutated 100, which is rare for 100. But if you had 2 organisms, then you could do that. So that's why small population size, bottlenecks, etc., have this genetic drift and all these problems. It's not optimal there, but if you have 100 or more, it's usually fine. Okay.
And does this graph repeat itself if you do more?
Yeah. It's not exactly the timing doesn't fit, but what does fit itself is what's called logarithmic slowdown. This is the curse of deep learning algorithms and all this evolution stuff, is that improvements take longer and longer. That's also observed in bacterial evolution in a test tube. I told you about an evolution that's already lasted 60,000 generations, and they keep growing faster and faster, but the improvements are more and more rare.
This is in all evolutionary processes, but because in modular processes it's not.
Yeah, in this kind of process. Yeah. Nice deep sigh of relief. Welcome back. Okay, so let's summarize. Typical. You do this simulation. Oh, and of course, you open up the gate and you get a non-modular solution, even though the goal is modular. So I designed here something that by eye you can see is made of modules. It would be great to have a XOR module, and an AND module. So an engineer would do that. But evolution didn't go to engineering school, tinkers them up, and you get, in fact, this is exactly the solution you get in one of the runs. There's other possibilities. It has n equals 10 gates, which is the smallest possibility. It actually, because of this cost, it doesn't have, so if you don't have the cost, you get all these kind of disconnected gates that that are like from misipur acher, but this cost trims you down. So you get a 10 gates solution. You can do this in 10 NAND gates. 10,000 generations, okay? Now, and I'm going to pause now. I want to ask you guys to pair up and explain to each other what just happened. Yeah, explain this thing. See if you have any question.
What happened?
How many gates do you end up at the end?
I already asked you.
10 gates. You always end up with 10 gates in this.
I thought you said you could add gates.
Yeah, you can add and remove, but the solution in this simulation is 10 gates. Because that's the minimum. And fitness has a cost. There's a cost.
Because the minimum, the engineering solution is also modular. There is
Also,
another solution with 10 gates.
no.
So 100 like drawings, right? 100 drawings.
מה קורה כשאתה מוסיף קוסט לנון-מודולריטי?
מה?
מה קורה כשאתה מוסיף לפיטנס קוסט של נון-מודולריטי?
זה לא חוקי.
למה?
כי איך החיה יודעת אם היא מודולר או לא?
לא, במעגל הזה אתה יכול לעשות מדידה של מודולריטי.
האמת שאני... לא יודע. אני לא יודע. כן, אני חושב שניסינו את זה. נדמה לי, אבל אני לא זוכר. אולי, אני לא יודע, אני לא זוכר. Okay, did any questions arise during this consultation? May I have your attention? Did any questions arise during this? If you have a question, please ask it, because other people also have the same question. So, just want to make sure I'm as clear as possible. So, any questions arise? Is there? Yes.
What does it mean to
To
duplicate?
duplicate? Duplicate means, let's say, I have just make a new gate. Let's say 202, and give it the same inputs. And now in next generation, maybe 202 can connect somewhere and.
You just add it to one of the circuits. You don't create.
Yeah, you add it to one of the circuits. So a mutation called add a gate does something like this.
So when
Oh, sorry, duplicate a gate. Duplicate a gate. Yeah.
So when we were confused about what we meant by a circuit, like is it 100 drawings like that?
Ah, okay. So each circuit is one of these, and I start with 100 of these random ones.
Because you're getting rid of the 50.
Oh yeah. So I have these 100 circuits. This circuit, this circuit, this circuit. And now I look at them and I choose the best 50% in terms. I rank them in terms of fitness. I choose the top 50%. I say goodbye to the bottom ones. And now that's what you meant by duplicate. Sorry, I didn't understand. And now I take these circuits and I make copies of them. These are like babies. And now that's the next generation. So they're all made of the top 50%. It could be the top 10%, and each one make 10 babies. And it could be the top 1%. And so it's like it's a parameter you can choose. It's called elite fitness selection. Yeah.
Okay, just a comment out of our discussion.
Yeah.
So, putting aside the fact that the goal was designed as modular, in principle, the modular solution is another constraint on the system. So we would expect in general situation to have more gates to solve it in a modular way rather than
Okay.
non-modular.
So your question about having more gates for modularity, which is correct, and let me get to that. Okay, that's the next topic. Okay, now we're going to do something else. So I'm going to assume that we're clear about the fitness, the genomes. I'm going to keep the fitness, the genomes, everything the same. Everything the same, everything the same, everything the same, everything the same, everything the same. The simulation will be the same.
Based on what we talked previously,
Yeah.
if you want to do modularity, you'll need to change the goal during the simulation.
Yeah, I'm going to change the goal during the simulation. That's what I'm going to do. So what we're going to do now is go back to engineering thinking and say, engineering uses modules where situations change. So let's change the goal. What do you mean change the goal? Let it evolve for E generations. For example, let's say 20 generations. And then keep everything, just change the goal, what we're adapting to. The way we select the top 50% and change the goal to goal G2. And then continue like that. So G1 for 20 generations, G2 for 20 generations, G1 for 20 generations. We can keep changing to G3, G4, G5, G1, G2, G1, G2. We're going to do G1, G2, G1, G2, G1, G2 every 20 generations. So I'll tell you what G2 is. Okay, that's the trick we're going to do. This is called, so up till now we saw what we're going to call this fixed goal. That's to say, only one goal, and we're not switching anything, equals infinity, one big epoch like that. And now we're going to switch goals. So if we change to G2 equals a randomly chosen Boolean function. So I can change to something like I take x, y, z, and w, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, and this is G1. G1 is something. And I take G2, I just choose zeros and ones at random here, and that will be my G2. So I have some Boolean function. That'll be my G2. Choose back to G1, back to G2, back to G1, back to G2. I get a terrible confusion. So evolution doesn't know what to do with itself. It starts with G2, then it changes to G1, then it changes to G2. And in general, you basically don't converge to something. You keep. But if we do something else, which is called modularly varying goals, by choosing G2 to be also modular, and not only modular, using the same modules, but wired differently. So G2 is going to be x XOR y and z XOR w. So I'm going to keep these two modules and put an OR gate here instead of this AND gate here. So what I'm doing here is saying the different environment needs the same elementary functions as the previous environment, just with a different combination.
Could you also just switch between the letters, like x XOR z and y XOR w?
Good point. Another thing that would work with switching z and x here. That'll also work, I think. I think maybe I have to rethink. I'm not sure, actually. Yeah. Doesn't sound, yeah. I think you have to be more tough. Yeah. Let's see what happens now. So I'm doing something very complicated. This is a very complicated Boolean function. It's made of two XOR gates. It's not simple. It's not monotonic. This is another very complicated Boolean function. And now we're even asking evolution. We're confusing evolution. We type G1, no, G2, or G1 every 20 generations. Did I explain what we're doing? Okay. Did I explain myself? Sure.
20 is very little, right? It takes
20 is very little compared to this 10,000 generations. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there intuition why the solution wasn't modular, or is it just something that came?
Yeah, why it was not modular. So, first of all, there's many more non-modular solutions than modular solutions. So, if you had to choose a solution at random, it would be non-modular most likely. We actually made a case where you can enumerate all 10 to the 11 possibilities, and we can count how many modular and non-modular. Huh? This is too big to count. And also, this minimality thing, with 10 gates you can't actually make a modular solution.
And what?
With 10 gates you can't make a modular solution. So, as far as I know. Okay, so what happens? Now we're going to do the MVG. MVG.
You need exactly 10 to make the modular solution.
Okay, let's argue about that in a sec, okay? Let me get into my rhythm. I'm going to use the red. Take from the whale, we'll take the red. Okay, what happens? He went to his page. Okay, you start, of course, with the random networks. Start with random networks. And you basically, you find a perfect solution in 1,000 generations. What's a perfect solution? Let's zoom in here. I'm going to zoom into here, like that. So I'm going to zoom into, this is generation, so this is generation, let's say 1,000, 1,020, 1,040. Okay, so perfect solution means you're perfect at goal G1, and here you switch to goal G2. So of course when you switch to goal G1, the circuits that are perfect for G1 aren't perfect for G2. So you drop in fitness, but within 2 generations, you get back. And then when you switch again to G1, you drop in fitness and you switch back within 2 generations. So what you get here, you get in 1,000 generations, you get circuits that are perfect for G1, and then rewire in about 2 generations to G2, and so on. So you get perfect solutions for 2 goals that are also rewirable solutions 10 times faster. What do the solutions look like? They look like this. This is one of the solutions. You get
But it's not minimum, right? It can have 10.
It has 11 gates. So you pay by having 11 gates. You pay by, so you're not optimal in terms of cost. You pay by having 11 gates, but you gain the ability to rewire. And I just want to mention that this little module, so the way this looks like, this circuit here, what is going on here? This module here is X XOR Y. This thing here computes X XOR Y. And by the way, this 4 NAND gate design is what the electrical engineers use to make exclusive OR. If they need to make exclusive OR on a piece of silicon, they use 4 NAND gates connected like that. That's the minimal solution for an exclusive OR made of NAND gates. And this little module here is Z XOR W. And this module here is an AND gate. And then what happens during evolution, when you switch the goal, something changes. It has to change. What changes is that two things change. Instead of this X here, you get this. So instead of these 2 connections, rewire to these 2 connections. These 2 connections rewire to like this. And then when you switch back, like this. When you switch back, like this. Switch back, like this. Yeah.
What would happen if
Right. If you try to give two output gates, one of them G1 and the other one G2, you'll get a non-modular solution. You need the switching. Before I let you guys to consider what we're doing here, I want to say that. Oh wait, any question under? Yeah.
But it's kind of cheating because you already know the answer and you put it in G2. Like if you had a general change in like you don't know what's going to change with the environment, you would build these models in like 1,000 different ways.
Yeah. So you say I'm cheating here because I designed modular goal here. I designed a modular goal here too, so that even though the goal is modular, the solution is non-modular. Yeah? But then G2 is also modular, and it also reuses the same modules. So what I would like to claim is that one possibility for the evolution of modularity in biology is the natural world is like that, more than like a random situation. And the reason is that in the natural world, there's something like moving that all organisms to do. Sometimes it's through water, sometimes through air, sometimes it's on land. So there's a moving module. And then there's a reproduction module. There's an eating module. There's etc. And these things are occurring for all organisms, but sometimes you need to change something inside that module. Sometimes you need to change something in the wiring between them. So something about the natural world is modular, not random. And that's an almost philosophical thing. Also, it has to do with human cognition, that we can only identify things that are modular, because we have to look at categories. It has to do with some physical things, like surface tension, the fact that atoms that are like, or molecules that are like each other, like to be together, that makes surface tension, makes pieces in the world, like this wood here, it doesn't fall apart. And, so there's some physical aspects to it. There's some, it's a mysterious, it's a prediction, I don't know, it's something in this range. Did I answer your question? So it's like, yeah. Good.
So what you're saying is that instead of putting G2 like this, I can put, say, similar to G1, but X or Y, or X and Y.
Here, change, let's say, this module.
Or, yeah, just
one thing, yeah.
Within the model,
Yeah.
And we'll keep our
Yes, that's correct. So in many cases, you can change the now this XOR to and or equal or and then what will happen is evolution doesn't need to touch anything here. It can change this, but this again depends on the details a little bit. But there's a paper scanning a lot, and I think in some case all possible changes like that and seeing where it works, where it doesn't, and can make sense of it. So it has to do a little with so the modules themselves need to be evolvable in a certain way. But, yeah.
Would it also create modularity if you modulate not the G1 and G2, but modulate the sampling of the signal?
The sampling of
for many iterations, you sample only
X
you vary it X and Y, and
okay.
you don't vary the Z and W. And then for many iterations, you vary
So this is another of a series of questions of good research projects. I don't know the answer, so I'm sorry. All right, so I just want to ask now, what happened if we take the MVG solution, modular varying goal solution, which is perfect, but stop varying the goals? So let's say we reach G1 and now we stay at G1. So we're a perfect solution. Will it stay modular? So the answer is modularity. I'm going to plot here modularity. So it's perfectly modular. So within a few generations, I don't remember how many, tens, let's say, it forgets this and goes back to this.
Even though you don't actually need to, I mean, what's it trying to perfect?
The epsilon, the cost.
Yeah, but you said the non-modular solution has 10, and there is a modular solution that's 10 as well.
I'm not aware of a modular solution that's 10. I only know about one that's 11. Yeah. Maybe you can find it, I don't know. You guys are so quick, I bet you can find it. It's a very difficult problem. But so this
With one goal, there is a 10 solution, and can be done in 2 and not in 3. Unlike XOR, which can't be done in 2.
Okay. This is, okay. We have so it's in some ways in this world you need to change the goals in order to keep the modularity. It's like without it you lose the modularity very quickly. Okay, so where are we? We understood our simulation with NAND gates, fixed goal, showed that there's a logarithmic slowdown, and then randomly varying the goals makes things even worse. But modularly varying the goals, keeping the same modules, makes you reach a modular solution that's rewirable. It's not only modular in structure, it's modular in function. Each of these modules has not only a structure that's separated from the rest, it has a function that's separated from the rest, right? And just like in biology, and speed, and it's 10 times faster. Now this speed thing is not a coincidence, because if you now try to generalize this game and make larger and larger adding more inputs, so now you need more gates, etc. You get circuits that are harder and harder to evolve. And when you do this MVG, modular varying goals, you can ask, how does the speed up scale with the complexity of the problem? So maybe it's always a factor of 10 faster, but that doesn't help you so much if it takes you 10 to the 11 generations to generate the circuits, because you'll never be able to do it anyway. So 10 to the 10 to the. So it turns out, did I explain myself now? Now we're going to just draw a graph. What happens when you do this with harder and harder goals, with more and more inputs? And more. So the answer is that MVG, modularly varying goals, MVG, speed up, increases with the problem, or let's say with the goal complexity. I just want to illustrate that here. So on this axis here is number of generations to solve the goal with a fixed goal situation. So we can take, so our gate here that we took 10,000 generations, but we can make things that take 1,000,000 generations, or 10 to the 8 generations. And this is very quickly, as you add more and more gates, this grows exponentially. So there's more and more. Logarithmic slowdown makes you stuck on local maxima very, very badly. And so the more complex the problem, the more generations you need to train. You can call it train. And here I'm going to call the speed up, which is number of generations in MVG divided by the number of generations in this fixed goal. So how much faster do you get? And so for our problem, we went 10 times faster for this circuit because it took us 1,000 generations, not 10,000. And it turns out that you get something like speed up goes like, I'm going to call this complexity. See? Complexity to some number. It's a numerical result. We don't understand exactly where it comes from. But so what I'm trying to say is that something that took 10 to the 7 generations now will take something like 10,000 generations. So it's like in some cases it's like taking the cube root. So make something 1 billion times more complex only takes 1,000 times longer to solve. Speed up versus a complexity, which is complexity of the goal is how many generations it takes to evolve it.
It's still the speed up of using 2 options.
Yeah, 2 options.
And how many generations? Because that
Okay, right. So the switching generations, the
optimal one, whatever it is.
Yeah, there's a wide range. You need to make it switch faster than this, otherwise, but slower than the time it takes to evolve in fixed goal. So that's actually a very large range. It could be, for the problem I showed you here, it's anywhere between, let's say, switching every 5 generations to every 1,000 generations. No, 10, I don't know. No, this is 10 generations.
So you lost it within 10 generations.
Yeah, so you need to, but I don't remember now. Avi, could you check this graph? I don't remember how long it
Oh,
took.
that was an S. That's what that
Where?
He says
Yeah, tens, yeah. Sorry, sloppy writing. Okay, so this is just a hopeful thing. I mean, a lot to understand what's going on here. How does this thing work? How does speed up increase with complexity? The way we think about it is that what you have is you have this circuit fitness landscape. It has a lot of local maxima and plateaus and valleys, and you get stuck on them for long, long times. But when you change the goal, you actually, if you're stuck on a mountain here, you change the goal, the whole fitness landscape is a different fitness landscape. So you have a new chance. But something about modularity of the goals makes it so that a local maximum, where you're stuck on a local maximum, you don't know where to go for one goal, is an area of high slope for the other goal. So when you're switching the goals, you're switching these two fitness landscapes, you create kind of continuously an effective ramp that leads you up, up, up to a place where there's two very close solutions for the two goals, which are modular, actually. So that's the picture we have. Why the speed up?
The goals are correlated.
The goals are very correlated and very specific because they reuse the same modules. That's important. Otherwise, you won't get this feature. So, and actually, we're trying to think for you computer scientists here. Suppose we have a very difficult problem, like traveling salesman problem, as G1. Is there a G2 you can invent that will speed things up? So that's like finding the G2 that will speed up a hard problem. I don't know how to solve that problem, but yeah. But maybe there exists something like that for some problems. Yeah.
How does this MVG problem relate to our world?
Thank you. How does MVG relate to our world? So, of course, it might just be a computer game to show that in principle you can get evolution of modularity and speed up. I think it could be telling us something about our world. So if we look at the problems of an organism, the problems of a protein, the problems of a gene, we can see that there's recurring demands. Like if you think of a protein, the idea to bind a small molecule, to bind DNA, to bind and make dimers occur in many, many different kinds of proteins. So those are like recurring goals. You just need to sometimes use this signal, sometimes this signal, sometimes this signal. So it's like the goals in biology are finite, and at the same time there's switching between what inputs are and outputs are in a way that reminds me of this. For animals, like I said before, the problems of moving, eating, reproducing are recurring, and each time you need to tweak. So now you're a mammal that moves to the sea, you have to change. By the way, all mammals, maybe Avi, you can give the paper. We printed out for you the bones in the forelimb of mammals. We're going to compare whale, cat, bat, and human. And you'll see that all of us, all the family of mammals, we have this one bone here, two bones here. Then we have these carpal bones here, the metacarpal and the phalanges. We all have the same modules. And what happens between the different organisms? So also the whale, right, has this, I forgot to draw here, it has the one bone here, two bones, carpals, etc., phalanges. What happened for the bat is that this metacarpal here grew about 10 times longer to make the wing. So we have in us a module, okay, the limb. There's not enough for everyone, so you have to share, yeah, in the spirit of sharing. Sharing is caring. And so, yeah, you can admire. Can you look at that? The whale duplicated. Good observation. The phalanges, the cetacean clade duplicated the phalanges. Yeah. So what's going? Let's just look at this. In answer to your question, let's just look at this module here. This limb. Okay. It is a wonderful module for mammals. It has these subparts. Now if you want to go from being a rodent like that to swimming, you can start tuning the bones here without affecting reproductive system, for example, without affecting the liver, without affecting the this like shields you. You can still get the way it's built. You can still get locomotion in a very effective way, and What else can I say? And it's very extremely fast changes here once you have this module. Also, duplication can happen. Once you have a phalange, this bone here, you can duplicate it. Now this duplication is working. Now I just want to get back to the wonder of biology. And the same thing for, okay, what's the opposite? The opposite would be to have all the functions. There's also non-modularity in biology. For example, as I said, the ribosome, which probably has a function that didn't vary since prokaryotes to make amino acid proteins. It's really hardwired. You can't separate it very, very well, and it's a kind of a conserved core process. So I think also modular has to have to do with very, very variable environments, and non-modular with constant environments. So if you have a constant goal, you probably go more to the non-modular case. And there's evidence that metabolic systems of bacteria, for instance, live in constant environments, like in the gut of termites. They kind of become non-modular, whereas things that are very variable conditions, like E. coli lives in the gut and in the soil, have modules for making different metabolites. So you can imagine bacterial chemotaxis, for example. You need to move, you have a flagella, you need to compute the chemotaxis system, and you need receptors. In principle, you could have put them all in one protein. The motor could also have been the receptor, for example. But you separate it, and that gives you the ability, if you're a new bacteria, to sense, to make a receptor for a different ligand, for a different chemical, or temperature, or magnetic fields, or whatever, and still move. So, it's kind of, but not everything is solved and neat, because suppose now you want to make a change to your limb, and you change a bone like that. As I said at the beginning, you still need the muscles to get there, the blood vessels to get there, the neurons to get there, and the brain region to use it. Otherwise, you made a terrible mistake. Like you get a useless organ. Or even, us. Some of us are tall, some are short. How do we wire up? Is everything in our genome changes if our height changes? How does that happen? All the connections like that. So I just want to tell you about another principle, or how biological engineering. I think human engineers can learn from biology sometimes. So this solution to this problem in biology is called follow the bone. Did any of you hear about this? So here's how it works. The bone is the leader. Okay, so if there's a change in the bone, the way blood vessels work is by a random search. They make small vessels like that, looking for areas that don't have oxygen. Areas that don't have oxygen secrete a molecule that calls and stabilizes the blood vessels. So the blood vessels reach an area where there's no oxygen, and then other blood vessels don't add to there because there's already oxygen. Muscles look for bone that's not yet been connected to tendons. Nerves look for muscle cells that haven't been innervated yet in a random search process. Brain regions expand and retract according to the signals they get. So if you, for instance, don't have a certain limb, that part that was supposed to control it gets reused for other purposes. This brain plasticity. So by making a hierarchy, so the bone determines the coordinates, and everything in a random search process that has simple local rules, just find where there's no oxygen, where there's no innervations there, you get this formation of a complex limb like that. Isn't that amazing? So we talk about bone modules, follow the bone, chemotaxis, and all we can do now is use our lung organ to take a nice deep sigh of relief. So thank you for this modular journey, and I'll see you next week for the last lecture.